In 2001, Mumbai woke up to a mystery that shook its high society. Shalini Kapoor, a successful media executive and a household name, was found dead in her apartment after hosting a private party. Her mother, Priya Kapoor, returned from a business trip that morning and made the devastating discovery. Shalini's death wasn't just shocking because of who she was, it was how it happened that left everyone stunned. She had been at the center of a glamorous world, known for her talent, charm, and success. But her sudden and tragic death exposed cracks in the world she lived in, cracks that no one had seen before. The police were called immediately, and the investigation quickly took off. What began as a tragic loss soon became a deeper probe into a life full of secrets. Behind the lights of her high-profile career and parties lay a story that was far more complicated. This is not just a story about how someone died, it's about uncovering the truth of what really happened that night. To understand this mystery, we first need to understand Shalini Kapoor's life, how she became the woman everyone admired, and what might have led to her tragic end. Shalini Kapoor wasn't just a name, she was a force in Mumbai's media world. Rising from humble beginnings, she climbed her way to the top with sheer determination and unmatched talent. Her leadership turned a struggling media company into one of the city's most respected brands. She wasn't just good at her job, she was a game changer. But Shalini's influence wasn't limited to her office. She was a familiar face at elite events, always dressed to perfection, blending confidence and charm effortlessly. People admired her not just for her success, but for the way she carried herself. Yet, behind the powerful image was a woman dealing with her own struggles. While she had built an empire in her professional life, her personal life often seemed at odds with that success. The bright lights of her career couldn't always hide the shadows she faced in her private world. To understand what happened to Shalini, it's important to know her life wasn't just about achievements, it was about balancing power, expectations, and personal challenges. Her career made her a star, but her personal journey was far more complex than anyone realized. While Shalini Kapoor's career was thriving, her personal life told a different story. She was married to Rajiv Malhotra, a prominent real estate businessman. Together, they seemed like the perfect power couple, successful, influential, and admired by everyone around them. They attended high-profile events, their smiles captured in magazines, and their partnership envied by many. But appearances can be deceiving. Beneath the surface, their relationship had its cracks. Rajiv's extravagant lifestyle and rumored affairs began to take a toll on Shalini. What started as minor disagreements soon turned into heated arguments. Shalini, a woman used to control and structure in her career, found herself feeling isolated and powerless at home. She turned to her friends and colleagues for support, but the loneliness lingered. No matter how hard she tried to keep the peace, the gap between her and Rajiv only widened. Their marriage, once a source of strength, had become a heavy burden. Shalini's personal struggles didn't make headlines, but they added another layer to the story of her life. The pressure of trying to maintain a picture-perfect image while dealing with private heartbreak made her life far more complicated than most people knew. Her professional success couldn't shield her from the personal battles she faced every day. The cracks in Shalini Kapoor's marriage didn't take long to deepen. Rajiv Malhotra's lavish spending habits and infidelity pushed their relationship to its breaking point. For a while, Shalini tried to make it work, clinging to the hope that things could return to how they once were. But with each argument, her sense of peace eroded further. It wasn't an easy decision, but Shalini eventually realized she couldn't sacrifice her own happiness any longer. Divorce, though painful, became her only option. Walking away from her marriage wasn't just about leaving a partner, it meant leaving behind the life they had built together, the image of perfection they had projected to the world. The end of their marriage was a turning point for Shalini. It was freeing, but also deeply isolating. The decision came with its own challenges, leaving her to navigate a new phase of life where she had to rebuild herself, not just professionally, but personally. Shalini's divorce wasn't just the end of a relationship. It marked the beginning of her search for meaning and stability in a world that suddenly felt very different. This chapter of her life shaped much of what followed, as she tried to find her footing after leaving behind a relationship that had once been central to her world. After her divorce, Shalini Kapoor found herself in a place she never expected to be alone. The once busy home she shared with Rajiv was now quiet, and the silence was deafening. For someone used to the hustle and excitement of both her professional and social life, the loneliness hit harder than she anticipated. In an effort to fill the void, Shalini threw herself into the city's vibrant social scene. Lavish parties, glitzy events, and glamorous gatherings became her escape. On the surface, she seemed to be enjoying her newfound freedom, mingling with high-profile friends and business associates. But behind the smiles and the sparkling dresses, she often felt hollow. Her attempts to reconnect with life through socializing didn't ease the ache of isolation. Shalini knew she wasn't just searching for companionship, she was searching for purpose. The life she had built before the divorce seemed distant, and the person she used to be felt almost unrecognizable. The parties and social appearances were distractions, but they couldn't hide what she was truly feeling. Shalini's journey through loneliness was deeply personal, a struggle to rediscover herself after losing not just her marriage, but also the sense of stability she once had. As Shalini Kapoor tried to move forward, her social life became a constant whirl of activity. Week after week, she attended exclusive parties, high-profile launches, and intimate gatherings with influential circles. These events gave her a chance to connect with people, but they also became a way to avoid the emptiness she felt inside. In the midst of this, Shalini began forming new relationships, some professional, others personal. She met people who admired her for her success and charm. But not all of these connections were built on genuine affection. Many were fleeting, casual interactions that provided momentary relief, but left her feeling even more distant once the night ended. Shalini was known for her ability to light up a room, yet she often went home feeling invisible. The people around her saw her as a powerful, glamorous figure, but few truly knew her struggles. Even her closest friends noticed a change in her, but didn't know how to help. While Shalini sought comfort in these relationships, she began to realize they weren't enough. The constant socializing and surface-level connections couldn't replace the deeper sense of fulfillment she was searching for. Her life was surrounded by people, yet she had never felt more alone. It was supposed to be another glamorous evening in Shalini Kapoor's life. In early 2001, she hosted a private party at her luxurious penthouse, inviting a close-knit group of men she trusted and interacted with regularly. The guest list included a mix of colleagues, business associates, and longtime friends. Each of them played a unique role in her life, and the evening started on a warm, familiar note. Shalini, as always, commanded attention. Dressed impeccably, she radiated confidence and charm. The conversation flowed easily. At first, discussions about work, jokes about shared memories, and casual chatter filled the room. But as the night went on, the atmosphere began to shift. The drinks kept pouring, and light-hearted exchanges turned into something more tense and competitive. The men around her seemed to vie for her attention, each trying to stand out in their own way. What started as subtle glances and remarks slowly escalated into bold attempts to capture her interest. Shalini, though aware of the growing tension, tried to maintain her composure, even as the energy in the room became increasingly uncomfortable. By the time the party reached its peak, lines had started to blur. The very people she had trusted were acting in ways she hadn't anticipated. What should have been a lively night among acquaintances was beginning to feel unsettling. As the evening continued, the events of the night would spiral into something far more troubling than anyone could have imagined. As the party stretched into the late hours, the energy in the room became unpredictable. The effects of alcohol were evident as conversations grew louder, laughter turned sharper, and boundaries started to fade. The men, who had once kept their intentions subtle, now began openly competing for Shalini's attention. What had started as a light-hearted evening transformed into something unsettling. Remarks became more direct, gestures more invasive, and the tension in the room thickened. Shalini, who had been sipping her wine quietly, seemed increasingly detached, her usual confidence replaced by a visible discomfort. Despite this, she tried to navigate the situation gracefully, unwilling to create a scene in her own home. But as the night wore on, things slipped further out of control. The guests, emboldened by alcohol and their own egos, ignored the signs that Shalini was retreating. The balance of the evening tipped from camaraderie to chaos, and Shalini, overwhelmed by the escalating behavior around her, struggled to maintain any sense of control. By the end of the night, it was clear that what should have been an intimate gathering had spiraled into a reckless display of disrespect and selfishness. The guests left one by one, but the damage they had caused lingered in the air, setting the stage for the tragic discovery that would follow. The next morning, Priya Kapoor returned home, eager to reunite with her daughter after a long business trip. She expected to find Shalini's usual lively energy filling the apartment. Instead, she walked into an eerie silence. The once vibrant penthouse, which had hosted a party the night before, now seemed oddly still. As Priya moved through the apartment, unease crept in. Glasses and bottles from the night's festivities were scattered around, hinting at the lively gathering that had taken place. But there was no sign of Shalini. Calling out her name, Priya walked into the bedroom, only to be met with a sight that froze her in place. Shalini lay motionless on her bed, her body cold and unresponsive. Priya's shock turned to horror as she noticed signs of injuries on her daughter, telling her that something had gone terribly wrong. Trembling, she tried to wake Shalini, hoping against all odds that it wasn't too late. But deep down, she knew the truth. Panicked and grief-stricken, Priya called the police, her voice breaking as she explained what she had found. What should have been a normal morning had turned into a nightmare. As the authorities arrived, it became clear that Shalini's death wasn't natural. The quiet apartment had become the scene of a chilling crime, one that would soon unravel a web of betrayal and deceit. When the police arrived at Shalini Kapoor's penthouse, they immediately knew this wasn't an ordinary case. The room told a story of a night that had gone terribly wrong. Glasses were overturned, furniture was slightly disarranged, and faint signs of a struggle hinted at something far more sinister than an accidental death. Inspector Rajesh Thakur, a seasoned investigator, was assigned to lead the case. His first step was to examine the scene with meticulous detail. Shalini's injuries, combined with the scattered remnants of the party, pointed to foul play. This wasn't just a tragedy, it was a crime. The investigation started with the basics, piecing together the timeline of the party. Witnesses were identified, and the names of the attendees were collected. Forensic experts combed through every corner of the apartment, collecting fingerprints, stray hairs, and other potential evidence. Every item left behind was treated as a possible clue. As Inspector Thakur reviewed the initial findings, one thing was clear: Shalini's death was no accident. The party guests were now suspects, and their actions during the night would be the key to unlocking the truth. With a growing list of questions and leads to follow, the investigation had only just begun. As the investigation gained momentum, forensic experts delivered critical findings that deepened the mystery. Shalini Kapoor's autopsy revealed the cause of death: asphyxiation, likely caused by a combination of factors. In addition to the physical evidence of assault, her body contained traces of an illegal substance, a powerful stimulant often used at parties. The findings suggested Shalini had consumed a dangerous mix of alcohol and drugs, leaving her unable to defend herself or even call for help. This was no simple overdose. The signs of abuse on her body painted a far darker picture. Inspector Thakur now had a clearer idea of the events leading to her death, but the question of who was responsible remained. Meanwhile, the forensic team uncovered DNA evidence from the crime scene, including traces that matched at least 2 of the 5 men who had attended the party. This discovery was a breakthrough. It linked the suspects directly to Shalini during her final moments. These revelations shifted the investigation into high gear. With concrete proof of wrongdoing, Inspector Thakur turned his focus to identifying the roles each suspect played in the tragedy. The forensic evidence didn't just support the theory of foul play, it became the cornerstone for building a case against those responsible. With the forensic evidence in hand, Inspector Thacker summoned the 5 men who attended the party for questioning. Each of them had been close to Shalini in different ways, but now they were all suspects in a crime that had shocked the city. The interrogations revealed more questions than answers. Amit Sharma, the sharp lawyer, claimed his memory of the night was hazy due to the amount of alcohol he consumed. Rahul Chawla, Shalini's business partner, gave short, unhelpful answers, his reluctance to cooperate raising suspicions. Vikram Ahuja, a senior manager known for his calm demeanor, was careful with his words, dodging detailed questions about the events of the evening. Anil Kapoor, a longtime friend of Shalini, expressed regret but firmly denied any involvement. Meanwhile, Kabir Joshi, her younger lover, appeared visibly nervous during questioning. His inconsistent answers only made him look more suspicious. Despite their varying stories, one thing was clear. All 5 men were hiding something. Their reluctance to be forthcoming added to the complexity of the case. Inspector Thacker knew that unraveling their conflicting accounts and matching their statements to the forensic evidence would be the key to revealing the truth. As the pressure mounted, it became a waiting game to see who would crack under the weight of guilt first. Inspector Thacker's patience paid off as the investigation advanced. Forensic evidence, security footage, and call records began to piece together the puzzle of what truly happened during Shalini Kapoor's final hours. One by one, the inconsistencies in the suspect's stories started to unravel, forcing the truth into the open. Security camera footage from the building showed the guests leaving the penthouse at different times between midnight and dawn. This confirmed that each of the men had stayed long enough for their actions to be scrutinized. Meanwhile, Shalini's last text messages to a close friend revealed her unease as the party spiraled out of control. The forensic DNA evidence tied 2 of the men directly to the assault, but it was the interviews that delivered the final blow. Under mounting pressure, Rahul Chawla was the first to break. His earlier confidence gave way to fear, and he admitted that the evening had escalated beyond anyone's control. His confession implicated others, prompting Amit Sharma to reluctantly confirm parts of Rahul's account. With their admissions and the irrefutable evidence, the chain of events became clear. What had started as a gathering among trusted friends had turned into a night of betrayal. Shalini had been failed by the very people she believed she could rely on, and their selfish actions had led to her tragic death. The investigation had uncovered the truth, but the cost of that truth was immeasurable. When the case reached the courtroom, it became the center of public attention. Shalini Kapoor's story was no longer just a tragedy, it was now a fight for justice. The trial brought together a city's outrage, the victim's family's grief, and the accused men's desperate attempts to defend themselves. Prosecutors presented an overwhelming case. The DNA evidence, security footage, and confessions painted a clear picture of what had happened that night. They showed how the suspects had taken advantage of Shalini's condition, violated her trust, and then left her alone in critical distress. The defense attorneys tried to shift the blame, arguing that Shalini's death was caused by a mix of alcohol and drugs, rather than the direct actions of the accused. They claimed their clients had no intent to harm her and attempted to portray them as bystanders to an unfortunate series of events. But the evidence told a different story, one of neglect, abuse, and selfishness. Witness testimony further exposed the suspects' roles in the events of that night. Shalini's friends and colleagues spoke about her struggles, adding emotional weight to the prosecution's case. The courtroom was filled with tension as each piece of evidence highlighted the betrayal Shalini had suffered. The trial wasn't just about convicting the guilty, it was about giving Shalini a voice she no longer had. By the time the closing arguments were made, it was clear that justice would not be denied. The jury's decision would soon mark the end of this painful chapter, bringing accountability to those responsible for Shalini's untimely death. The jury's verdict was swift and decisive. All 5 men were found guilty of sexual assault and involuntary manslaughter. Their sentences ranged from 15 to 20 years in prison, ensuring they would face the consequences of their actions. The courtroom was filled with a mix of emotions: relief, grief, and anger. Shalini Kapoor's family finally saw justice served, but the loss of their beloved daughter remained an unfillable void. The case didn't just end with the convictions, it sparked a broader conversation. Media coverage highlighted the abuse of power, the neglect of responsibility, and the failure of those closest to Shalini to protect her. Her story became a rallying cry for change, urging society to reevaluate how it views trust, accountability, and the safety of women. For her mother, Priya Kapoor, the verdict was bittersweet. While the men who betrayed her daughter were punished, no sentence could bring Shalini back. She vowed to honor her daughter's legacy by advocating for victims of similar crimes, ensuring that Shalini's death would not be in vain. The impact of the case went beyond the courtroom. It became a symbol of justice for those who have been silenced, and a reminder that the truth, no matter how deeply hidden, will eventually come to light. Shalini's story continues to echo in the hearts of those who followed the case, serving as both a warning and a call for action to protect the vulnerable and hold the guilty accountable.